What up, Calvin?
Hey, how you doing, man?
Oh, man. Hey, thanks for coming to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for playing drums here at the National Conference with us.
This has been a blast, man. I was so not. I didn't really know what I was expecting. You know,
Yeah.
I've enjoyed working with the Vineyard anytime they ask me to do anything, but this has been something I will never forget, man. This entire weekend I was at Vineyard Evanston for the retirement service
Steve.
for Pastor Steve.
Yeah.
I've never met those people ever before.
Really?
And I was moved to tears in that service. Like I wanted to get up and speak.
Oh, man, come on, let's go.
I wanted to get up and say something about just from listening to all of the wonderful things that people said about them. And so going from Saturday being with them and then getting here on last night, the worship experience.
Yeah.
Forgive me. What is the gentleman's? What's the pastor name that started Vineyard? They played the audio clip.
Oh, that would be John Wimber.
John. Oh man.
Yeah, that clip. Okay, so they played that last night. So if you're listening to the podcast, last night at the National Conference and you weren't here, they played maybe, a 15-minute clip? It was from a John Wimber sermon from 1988.
Wow.
And I knew they were going to do this. And I was like, I didn't know if it was going to work.
It was so powerful.
It was ridiculous.
I was standing backstage and there was so many gems in there, man.
Yeah.
And it's just Vineyard. I'm new to just even my knowledge of the fellowship, but every single person I've come in contact with has just been like life changing. I was introduced to Vineyard through Pastor Gino Olson.
That's right. Shout out Gino.
And then Christian music's one of the industry's probably best kept secrets, Casey Coram.
Yeah.
I was just completely unaware, but I mean, man, those guys and everyone I meet, it's just like every person's just good and good and good.
Yeah.
But they're all just their hearts, man.
That's right.
It's just an honor to be here.
I'm glad that you're with us, and I'm glad we've been working together.
Yeah.
So if people don't know, you've been helping us with some of our Vineyard Soul stuff. Like you produced a couple tracks on some of the Vineyard Soul in the past, but then this last project, the Chicago sessions, you did the whole thing.
Yeah, I did the whole thing. The first one I worked on, which had the song "Generous God" on it.
Yes.
I just kind of was just a session player on there, and I helped Pastor Gino and Casey like land a couple of other players on there and things like that. And then for some crazy reason, Gino and Casey engaged me more and asked me about producing the project, the EP with them. And so I was extremely honored. Great songs on there.
Yeah, we're excited.
It's a great project.
Well, and what's cool for us is, I mean, you maybe you don't know our whole Vineyard story, and I won't go into all of it, but like the Vineyard started in Southern California, and it's super white bread, like super white bread, right?
Yeah.
But as the Vineyard's gone on for the last 40 years, God has brought Hispanics to us. God has brought the African American community and the Asian community to us. And so like Gino and Casey were very interested in there being a soul representation of who the Vineyard is. And what's cool now is by the time we've done this third project, I told Gino this, it's not aspirational anymore. It's like, these are our real people. Those songs were written by Vineyard people of color. They were played and sang by Vineyard worship leaders.
Yeah.
They're not just people out and about, but it's cool to be able to like work with you and Philip. Didn't he play
Philip
keys?
Feaster, shout out to Philip Feaster, my best friend and my production partner.
Yeah,
Tips Joy.
Yeah, it just brings something else to it.
Yeah,
and it means a lot to us.
Yeah, it means a lot to me.
Yeah,
you know, music is so personal, and for me, anytime I'm getting ready, I'm able to participate in a worship experience and engage. You know, and it involves me playing drums. That's just a bonus. That's a plus.
Come on.
And so it was, man. I mean, those sessions were. You look at the footage. I mean, man, some of those sessions, like the singers were in, like you know, and the band was in. We were. Yeah. It was just a wonderful worship experience, and we were fortunate enough to document it. But man, those songs minister to each and every last one.
Amen. Yeah. Well, okay, so here, let's do this. Let's take maybe a left turn here. We've been talking about some stuff you've been doing with us lately.
Yeah.
Where'd you come from? What kind of family did you grow up in? Was it like a family of faith? Like these are the things we always want to know on this podcast. Like, how'd you get here?
Yeah. My parents raised me in church. My dad was a musician and grew up in a very kind of spiritual holiness type of church. very staunch, almost Pentecostal.
Yeah.
You know, pastored by a woman, Doris Evelyn Davis, Trinity All Nations, and that's the church I was raised in. It's my DNA is there, like strong.
Where's that at?
It's in Chicago, Illinois. It was in on the south side of Chicago. Pastor now is Bishop Larry Roberts. I'm still connected to the ministry because of family roots, but I grew up on the south side of Chicago, growing up playing in church, following around behind my dad, you know, begging him to let me hang out with him because he was working with everyone.
And what did your dad play?
He played guitar and keyboards.
Okay.
He was a songwriter.
Yeah.
And so I at a certain time, at a certain point, by like the time I was maybe 8 or 9, I was his personal drummer.
There you go.
So he was working with a bunch of artists, you know, and you know, he would be going out, you know, rehearsals and songwriting sessions, and I would just be hanging out with him. So
why did you play drums, though? I mean,
it was, man, drums chose me. I always tell people, like, I did not choose drums. Drums chose me. My parents, well, my dad passed in 2014, but my mom will tell you, like, I ruined tons of cookware when I was a kid.
Oh, you did pots and pans?
Yeah, like, just straight up. Like, it was from the womb out, you know, so... But I was always in love with the drums, and it's just something that just it grabbed me as soon as.
What was your first drum kit?
First drum,
remember?
First drum kit. Of course, I went through the stages where my parents bought me the toy drum kits, and then I went through the stages where on Christmas, like I got a bunch of toys, and I would get all the boxes. Yeah. Shove the toys aside and make a drum kit out of the boxes.
That's right.
But my very first drum kit, my real drum kit, when I was 8 years old, my parents bought me a Pearl Export. Yeah, as a chrome gray finish.
Same, dude. Yeah, I had some, but they were like they were burgundy. Yeah, the burgundy ones. Yeah, same.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So
that's good.
It's my first drum kit. Yeah.
Okay, and so you traveled with your dad for how long?
Yeah, I was, man, forever. I mean, up until he got ill, and when he got sick in 2012, every now and then, you know, I would sneak in a service where he was and just be on the drums. And those are the best days of my life, man. Just me and him at church, you know, just having those moments and always taking me back to when I was a kid. You know, no matter. You know, at a certain point, you know, and I've been blessed to travel the world and play in front of a lot of people, but nothing was like, you know, when it was just that thing with me and my dad at church on a Sunday morning. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, so I know that you grew up playing with your dad. Mm-hmm. I know that at least now, in my mind anyway, I know you've done all kinds of stuff, but I know you're like synonymous, like in the Black gospel world. Like you're just one of the great Black gospel drummers. Talk to me just about like Black gospel in general. Like, what does it mean to you? What does this expression of worship mean?
Yeah. Well, you know, I guess contemporary gospel, you know, and traditional gospel, all the things I grew up on, going back from James Cleveland, Andre Crouch, the Hawkins, you know, Hawkins family, the Winans, all that stuff is just stuff we were raised on, and it's all this big gumbo pot of like all this music. So you can listen to a Black gospel album, and you're gonna get some blues, you're gonna get some jazz, some big band, you're gonna get worship, you're gonna get praise, you're gonna get funk. Yeah. You know, you can go back and listen to like Thomas Whitfield. He had this very, very, it was a classical feel, but the changes and the progressions that he added to it was something that we'd never heard. You know, James Cleveland had his thing, Andre Crouch had his thing. Andre was just a songwriter. You know, he was an incredible songwriter, just the gift of songwriting. God just blessed him with that. But he also was a very, very studied musician. And if you look at the guys he worked with the best. He worked with Abraham Laborio, Joe Sample, just a guitar player. I can't think of his name right now, but Ricky Lawson, all those guys. You know, he was working with those guys, and he worked with Michael Jackson. Yeah. So you know, Black gospel music is just really just this mixture of all these different, you know, things, and you'll listen to an album and hear all those different styles on there, and so in saying that, it's developed and groomed and raised musicians in the church who had access to all these different things.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, a lot of times I'll listen to like podcasts or like documentaries or interviews with other musicians, and maybe they're not even in the church.
Yeah.
But everybody's story, like not everybody, tons and tons of people, their story is, well, I started singing in church, or I started playing in church, and maybe now they're on the radio, or maybe they're like, a pop monster somewhere. But it's interesting how the church, and especially gospel music, it put a foundation underneath people to do pretty much anything.
It put a foundation under us, man. It gave us training. The hours that we've spent, developing the gift and people being patient with us. How many churches go and you see a worship leader there that's like, oh, they got potential, but they ain't quite got it yet. But the pastor's patient with them, and the audience and the members push them and encourage them.
That's right.
That's stuff that you just, if you're on a big stage and somebody paid $85, $95 for a ticket, there's no patience. It's I want my money's worth.
Yeah.
And if you ain't got it, hand the mic over to the next person. But yeah, the church has just been phenomenal with doing that. So many, and I think that's in all churches, in the black and the white church. And
that's how, like my oldest son is a great drummer, but he started playing on Sunday mornings when he was 12, and he did fine, right? Like as a 12-year-old, he did fine. He wasn't great, but your point about like the church is patient.
Yeah.
Listen, like the first Sunday my son played drums, people lost their minds. And he wasn't great, but they encouraged him, and it built that foundation, and there was that patience and that, I don't know, that elasticity there for him to grow as a musician. And so many people have that story.
So many people, and we're all fortunate. We're all fortunate that we have this platform for us, because who knows where we would be or what we were doing. What we would be doing. What wouldn't we have? What would the world be missing if that platform wasn't given to us, if the grace wasn't extended,
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. Okay, so I know you've played tons of gospel, but I know that's not the only thing you do.
Yeah.
Like you play pop records.
Yeah.
Play soul records and R&B records. And so I kind of think of that as like, it feels like you have range. Yeah. Like when a musician is able to touch a lot of different bases, to me that means you've developed some bigger muscles. So talk about how do you develop musical range or musical muscles where you can not just get stuck in one box?
Yeah, it's important that if this is something you want to do for career, if this is something you want to have be able to make a living in, you've got to absolutely, be diverse. It helps for sure, especially if you're starting off as a sideman, because you want to be able to get all the calls or as many of them as you can, at least,
Yeah.
So when I was young, when I was young, graduating high school and, working my way through the music scene in Chicago, during the day, I played jingle sessions for radio and TV spots, and you hear what's on the radio. They use music to advertise everything, to sell everything. Yeah. And you never know what what the idea is going to be. So you got to be well versed in that. You got to show
So you just
up.
went to the studio and you played jingles?
I played during the day. I would, maybe 2 or 3 days a week. I was downtown just trucking through, like just hitting studios. Like people were like, hey, I got a session here. Hey, I got a session here. This is a radio spot. This is a TV spot. So I did that during the day. Then early in the evening, I was at my church rehearsal, and then from there I go play a gig at night in the club. Sometimes it was a jazz gig, sometimes it's a funk gig.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was a soul thing. Yeah. Sometimes it was whatever. It was, hey man, just come. You'll feel it. We'll make up some stuff on them.
Calvin, what I'm hearing you say is you just kept saying yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You just said yes. If somebody said, "Hey, we need something," you were just
I tried to. Yeah, I showed up, but I also tried to make sure, even though I'm a Christian and I've been a Christian my whole life since, I grew up in church, so the majority of the music that I knew and was based around, I was strongest in, was gospel music. But I did take some time to make sure I was, studied in jazz and in Latin and, classical. I went to performing arts schools. So I had to learn to read and, play concert instruments, xylophone and marimba and timpani and things like that, So, and it helped. Yeah, it stretches you. Yeah.
Well, talk to me about learning jazz. Was that something like that came natural to you?
No.
Yeah, okay. So just talk to me about that experience, because I talk to musicians sometimes, and when we talk about jazz, it's a lot of times it's one of two ways. It's like sometimes it's almost home base. It just kind of flowed out of them.
Yeah.
And then sometimes it's like, no, I had to really put my nose down and learn.
Yeah. When I was in, like I said, when I got to the high school that I graduated from, it was a performing arts school. The only form of jazz I'd heard was like what I'd heard on a gospel album. And I think, like, just to my point, if you just pull up a YouTube clip and look up a song by the Hawkins family called Strange. It's a big band. Like, this was the first time this was my introduction to this kind of music. From there, I just began to like, what is this? And I understand it was like big band. It was a big band jazz track, whatever. And so when I got to the high school, I met some guys who just kind of started introducing me into that other stuff. I had to go and I had to take like beginner jazz band, which was weird because in beginning jazz band, I was playing with like 15 individuals that never played an instrument ever in life.
Yeah.
But I'd been playing my whole life, but I couldn't read. So I started learning to play bass, learn try to like read bass music because I was good on drums, but I couldn't read. But like by growing up playing in church, I learned to play everything by ear. So one of my handicaps was, okay, if I couldn't read it, I just heard it one time and then I knew it.
Yeah.
And with these people, it was like, it just took me. So I figured that, well, I'll just get on the instrument that I've never played before. And then that way the playing field is even.
That's right.
But jazz is really one of those things that you can't fake it. You cannot fake that. Mm-hmm. You can't fake that. Either you got to study and you got to be in it. A real jazz musician, no matter what instrument they play, they can tell if you don't play jazz. They can.
Anybody ever tell you that?
Yeah, man, yeah. Plenty of times I sit down, they be like, "Oh, you're a funk guy, huh?"
Oh
okay.
yeah.
He's up on the bass drum.
He's up, son.
Yeah,
too funny.
Yeah,
too good.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's funny. It's funny how that kind of stuff it sticks out, right?
Yeah.
Like for the guys who are all the way in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me shift gears here too, because we've been talking about like being a musician and we've been talking about like having range. Here's what I'm thinking about. You're an amazing drummer. You're coming to like a worship moment, like this week with us at the Vineyard National Conference. You're playing with a bunch of people you don't know, worship leaders you maybe never met.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's that. Or maybe you're going to a studio and maybe you're just going to be the session drummer that day. Mm-hmm. And the producer and the artist is there. And maybe they have a vision for the song, or maybe the worship leader has kind of an arrangement in his or her head.
Yeah.
All right. Talk to me how you manage wanting to bring to the worship leader or the worship experience or the producer or the artist what they think they want, but then at the same time, like you have a style, like you have a way, you have a fingerprint, and you want to put who you are into the music. Talk to me about that.
Well,
how do you bring it to the song?
Well, the first thing is that, one of the benefits of me, when I was, like I said, running through downtown, doing all those sessions, it was jingle sessions, a lot of that work is referred. So I'm most of the time I'm working with somebody I never worked with before. So a guy's calling another producer going, "Hey, I need a drummer for a jingle session. Hey, call this guy. Hey, man, I got your number from this guy, and then this guy got my number from this guy. They got my number from that guy."
Yeah.
So I'm not foreign to walking into sessions and seeing a guy there and being like, "Hey, I've never met this guy before." So that was that's something I've gotten used to, especially as studio sessions and sessions have gotten more where people became more open to guys bringing guys in, not working with the same guys all the time. So that's one thing. The other thing is, as far as the worship thing, even this week, like I got some of the tunes this week, and then somebody sent me a version of a song, and then the worship leader was like, "Hey, I know the version you got, but we kind of do it a different way."
That's right.
So it doesn't quite stick, so much to the form. Do it this way. The guy that led worship this morning, Tim was kind of like that on one of the songs we did this morning. It's like, "Hey, I know you got, but this is kind of the way we're gonna do it," and then, just be open to that.
Yeah.
And then I always wait for someone to invite me to either give my opinion or to step out, you know, and say, hey man, it's like, give me one of those signature Calvin things, or, you know, but other than that, you know,
so I hear you saying like you're coming to serve the song.
Yeah, I'm coming to serve the song.
You're coming to serve that moment.
Yeah. And then if there's more asked of me or more required, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, you want people to enjoy what they got, and you want them to, you know, feel like, hey, this is what this moment was for. Yeah. Sometimes it's just not necessary, you know. And you know, sometimes it's not necessary when we do it anyway. Sometimes it's needed, but it's not so much needed. Yeah. And you can plan for it, you can plan it, but if you're really paying attention, you know, I learned from working with Fred Hammond, always take the temperature of every room that, you know, we go in. So every night I would just go, when we would be on bills, you know, say 4 or 5 artists on stage, I would just go and take a little bit of the other artists, just see how the people are responding, you know, what the audience is like, what the energy level is like. And then I can go and say to Fred, okay, yeah, we can go out there and play our whole show from top to bottom, give them a performance. Yeah. Or this is a church audience. People are looking to be ministered to. Yeah. So maybe we need to go out there. Maybe we don't need to give them a show. Maybe we don't need a performance. Maybe we just need to go out there and see and find the connection, you know. And then he would go, okay, you know, so this is what we're going to do, you know. Or even, I don't even have to say that to him. Because he would always be listening. So he's going, hey, I'm sensing this or I'm sensing that, you know. And that was the benefit of that I had of being so close to him for 13 years. You know, I got personal access to one of God's greatest, you know, worship leaders. So
I'm hearing 2 things in that. I'm hearing, like, number 1, read the room.
Read the room.
And
absolutely.
then number 2, like, I'm even hearing in this story, like, of you and Fred, I'm hearing this is the gift of community, like the community of musicians, like listening to each other, like feeding off of each other, letting Fred's intuition lead, but maybe sometimes Fred's saying, Calvin, what are we going to do?
Yeah, he would absolutely. I would go and talk to him every night before we go on stage and say, okay, what's the crowd like? You know, okay, cool. Did you go hear anybody else? Yeah, and I knew he wasn't asking me if I wanted to hear anybody else to see if I wanted to listen to him. He wanted to know if I'm on top of my job, because as his music director and his right hand man, he wanted to make sure that we were on the same page. So if he gets on stage and he starts changing stuff up, I know what's happening. I know why he's doing that, you know. So that was the benefit of that. And then also, you know, those events, it should be an extension of worship, you know, going from artist to artist to artist, you know. You want to can give people a continuous flow of an encounter, you know. That's right. Yeah. That's
right. Okay. How long have you been playing drums? Like not just as a kid, but like as maybe a pro, or like this is my job?
Well, I started getting the first playing round I got on to play drums and get a check. I was 14 years old.
That's too good. That's too good. All right, so you've been doing this for more than a minute.
Yeah. I'm 42. I'll be 43 next month.
Oh, too good.
In a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
So
all right. So how do you keep growing? How do you stay curious?
Man, I will be honest. I am extremely motivated by the younger musicians.
Okay.
That I listen to and see and hear and follow.
Well, what's setting you on fire right now? Anything like at the top of the
from a drum perspective. There's a guy named a couple of Chicago drummers. One guy in very particular, Josiah Manox. He's got a brother that's incredible named Leonard Manox. There are 2 guys that are actually my cousins, and I'm not saying this because they're my cousins, but 2 guys also from Chicago living in LA. Yeah. One is playing with Ella May. His name is Jermaine Poindexter. Another is playing with Khalid. His name is Clemens Poindexter. 2 incredible drummers. Yeah. Those are 2 guys that I'm listening to. And then a bunch of guys, Lacey Comer, Derek Ray Jr., guys are gonna kill me because Jalen Kraut from Chicago. Those are just a bunch. And there's so many more. Then you got the young prodigies, Justin Lee Schultz, the young kid that plays like bass. You got Jaden Baker. You know, those kids, seeing them. Dominic McNabb. These are all kids that are like prodigies, and you see these guys, and then you know you hear them and you see them, and then you like a video or you leave them a comment, and then they go, "Oh man, I've been listening to you. You're such an influence. Right. I appreciate." And I'm like, man. But then hearing those guys take the things that they've studied or watched or seen, grab from me, and then take it and put a different spin on it. Hearing those guys.
So that's where the inspiration comes from.
That's where the inspiration comes from. Also, holding strong to my roots, man. Yeah. You know, I study, songwriters, which is what I'm kind of passionate about right now. Production. I study those guys. Quincy Jones. You can never go wrong with studying Correct. Quincy Jones. Donald Lawrence, who is one of my favorites. Kirk Franklin. He's an incredible. That dude's just bad. He's bad. Those guys and my peers, Aaron Lewis, Trent Phillips. You know, I could go on for days naming names that. Guys of musicians that influenced me, but that's truly what keeps me like pushing it, man.
Well, and here's what I hear too. I'm hearing the community thing again. Yeah. But as soon as you started saying like where the inspiration comes for you, and you started naming these people, I noticed your energy came up. Yeah. Isn't that? Yeah. So it's real. There's something there. It's like. Yeah. When we get together. Yeah. So there's more.
Yeah. And that's the one thing. There's those guys, the energy. When you see a musician and you can feel his heart and his passion through his instrument, and you can tell that he's not playing that drum and he's not playing his bass just because because there's a lot of YouTube guys now, a lot of talented guys,
Instagram drummers,
who can just that's what he did, and they just. Go and copy it. Yeah. But when you hear something, what comes from the heart reaches the heart. When you hear a guy playing and you can tell he means everything he's playing, it's just that's inspiring, and it hits a little different.
I love that. I love that, and I love that you're connected to the tradition. Yeah, this is also what I'm hearing in your story.
Yes, sir.
Connected to tradition. Your dad. Yeah. Southside Chicago. Fred Hammond. Yeah. But then there's these younger guys, and they're in Chicago or they're in L.A. Yeah. Yeah. So to me, I'm hearing that. Especially if we want to grow as musicians, we got to sink our roots down into tradition. Yeah. But then we got to look
to the future.
Look to the future, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think that's actually powerful, and it's in your story.
Yes, sir.
Big time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I would love it since you're on the pod and you're talking to mostly worship leaders and musicians on this podcast. What do you want to say to maybe just the Vineyard worship leaders or musicians? And there's a lot of non-Vineyard people on this podcast too. So, man, from your seat, because you do a lot of church, you do other stuff too. But from your seat, what would you want to say to
if I'm talking to the Vineyard? If I'm talking to the Vineyard, I would just say, man, continue to stay the course. Believe in the people that God has placed to lead you. I know that I do know that there's some changes happening in the Vineyard, and there's a shift happening, and some people I heard Tim was talking about today. Some people were saying, I've been doing this for so long, maybe this is my last national conference, and he was just praying for people to, remain, get a second win, and man, there's so much richness here. I would just encourage everyone to just continue to stay the course, push forward, find where God can use you here in the Vineyard, because there's work to be done for sure. We're coming out of the pandemic, possibly we're looking at another one, nobody knows, we don't know what's to come, but there's definitely kingdom work to be done. And one thing I know about the Vineyard is they are serious about business. So, if it means being in another space, operating in another space, but I love that I see the people here and I see them serving with their hearts. I see them, engaging. And I think that is something every movement could take from. And so I would just encourage you guys to continue to set the pace, because there are people watching, and there are people that are you guys are setting the bar for so many that maybe you don't even know are looking at you. I'll never, ever, ever. From this past weekend with Pastor Steve and his wife, and to being here, the way I see ministry and do ministry is completely different. Just from 3 days with the Vineyard,
Amen. Yeah. Well, we'll take that word.
Yeah,
we'll take that word and we'll take it to heart. Okay, let me ask you just one more question.
Sure,
and we'll wrap. This podcast is called The Ferment, and kind of like our idea is that things change, right? So grapes start on the vine, but they end up as wine. But something happened to it, right? Like wine is not like grapes.
Nope.
But it is, right?
Yeah.
And it's really this metaphor that things change. Things got fermented.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what's changed in your life.
Well, man, you talk about
what's undergone the process of fermentation.
You talk about fermentation, man. You got to think about it. At some point, grapes go into wine. It gets ugly.
Yeah.
The grapes look old.
Yeah.
They look worthless. It's almost like, man, you can't do anything with that. And then some kind of way they turned into this magical thing where, man, people buy bottles of wine that cost thousands of dollars.
They do.
And at one point it was considered worthless. So in saying that, man, you know, in my life, man, an awesome thing about God is, well, I've been going to fermentation. I'm probably still going through it, man.
I think we all are.
Yeah. I know today a pastor came and prayed for me while I was on the drums. And he said to me, he said, man, God is pleased with you. He said, he's pleased with you. And I know, he said, God is telling me to let you know that he's pleased with you and there's work for you to be done. Don't be so hard on yourself, man. Keep going. He just came up to me and prayed for me.
Did that resonate?
Oh my God. I mean, I was almost under my drums. This was at the end of the morning service today. I never saw the guy's face, and so I hope I appreciate your prayers. I don't know who you are because because as soon as he laid hands on me, he came up to me and he talked about the favor of God that's rested upon my life, and he was saying, "Man, but you're in a place right now where you're going back to the simple things. You're going back to your love for God." But to get on to talk about the thing you brought up. I know at one point, you know, we all feel like we're worthless and we all feel like we're of no benefit and we're just how disappointed God must be in us. You know, maybe that's something I struggle with, you know. I'm in another place in my life, you know, going into ministry now and questioning about whether this is the right time and whether I'm even worthy of it. But that fermentation thing, you know, God is notorious for taking things that people maybe see no value in. King David was a young boy cleaning up behind sheep.
That's right.
And God made him a king.
That's right.
You know, and so at some point people were going, he's nothing.
Yeah.
You know,
he didn't get invited to the dinner.
Didn't even get invited.
All the brothers came, but Dad didn't invite him.
Didn't invite him.
Yeah.
And so, man, you know, I just implore all of you, you know, those of you that are struggling, you know, man, God's going to take your grapes and you're going to have $1,000 bottle of wine, you know, just keep pressing it and be encouraged in the process. I went through a very rough period in my life in 2012 and I lost my dad. When my dad got ill, I was robbed. Two guys robbed me at gunpoint. Beat me pretty bad with steel bats. Man, I had a broken arm. This scar right here that's on my head. My head, I had a gash and I got another one in the back. And the doctors were like, it's going to be 12 months before he plays drums again. And we don't know if he's ever going to be the same. And man, I was just like, what in the world? Yeah. And everything about my life after that moment got better.
Okay, so talk to me about that.
Everything. I was a better man. I had a different appreciation. I'll start with the drums. Yeah. From that moment, man, every time I sat down on the drums, I played from a different place. Yeah. Because I was made to realize that this could all go away in a second. This could be my last time. And wouldn't it be a shame for me to get on the drums and just kind of, I've done it before.
Phone it in.
Never, ever. And it's easy, and it's kind of easy to get to that place when you do it so much and when you've done it so many times. You have a different appreciation for when you see your family, when you see your kids, when you look at your kids, and you don't know, man. Leaving the house and coming back is not a given.
That's right.
It's not a given. It's you know. So
you lost your dad, but then
throughout all of that. My dad got sick and passed. Yeah. So my dad was in the hospital.
Got it.
And I'm going through that with him, you know, and it was a rough period.
Yeah, so I'm hearing you had two losses.
Yeah.
Lost your dad, and for a while,
you
lost the ability to play drums.
Which is the thing
that's what you're here for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I've never not had it. I've never not had it.
That's when you got pressed.
Yes. Yes,
that's when
I'm
you
feeling
got crushed.
worthless now. I don't have my best friend. I don't have anybody to encourage. My old man my pops was sick. He basically, making his transition, and my mother was there. She absolutely carried me through that process. I don't know what I would have done. My family did too, but I was really broken. And that was in my ugly process, because I'm like, I'm not worth anything right now. Yeah. I can't support my kids, my family, because I don't have a way of making money. Yeah. I'm looking all beat up. I'm battered. I'm in a sling. I'm ugly. My and all of this, the fermentation, bro.
That's right. You got crushed.
Yeah, man, crushed. But man, I mean, everything about my life, on the other side of that, was better. When I went to my first therapy session, when they took the cast off, I went the very next day. And a friend of mine had a motorcycle accident and torn he tore some very ligaments or tendons or something in his hand.
Yeah.
But he recommended the specialist to me. I go to my first day of therapy the day after they take the cast off. And the therapist has me in this session for about 40 minutes. And he's like, so when did you get your cast off? I'm like, yesterday.
Yeah.
He's like, really? I'm like, yes, sir. He's like, all right. He comes back. He leaves. He comes back. He gives me a little squeegee ball. He said, man, you take this home. You don't have to come back here. He's like, you don't need any therapy, man. Your muscles. He said, I've seen people who've not had a cast.
That's right.
So everything about, and I went back to playing drums maybe a few days later. The very next day I went to my studio and I started practicing, and it took me about maybe 4 or 5 days just to not feel any pain.
Yeah.
But man, every morning I get up, I get out of the shower, and I wipe the mirror off, and I see this gash. I see this gash, and it's a remembrance for what God did for me, man. If I didn't have that, I may forget, what that period that I went through. Maybe, hopefully, I wouldn't, but just so I don't, man. I see this mark every morning. I thank God for bringing me through it.
Cal, thanks for telling us that story.
Yeah.
But here's what's interesting to me. I've talked to a lot of people on this podcast about this sort of thing, like what's changed you.
Yeah.
How did you change, or what has changed in your life? And one of the interesting things is, for a lot of people, it's a story of pain.
Yeah.
And loss.
Yep.
Yeah, get crushed.
Yeah.
And then God does something with that pain.
Yeah.
And he changes us into something better.
When I was going through that, a pastor friend of mine told me, he said, God doesn't test anything he doesn't plan to use. And so all you got to do is stay diligent about getting on the other side of this, man. Amen. There's a testimony on the other side.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. That's a word.
Yeah.
We'll wrap it there.
Yeah, man.
Calvin, thanks for hanging out with us.
Thank you for having me. Blessings to the Vineyard. Thank you guys so much for this amazing week. I wish I was staying longer, man. I wish I was staying longer.
Next
time.
Yes,
sir. Indeed.
But listen, I know we're going to do some more stuff together.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right?
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks so much for having me.
Also, killer beard, my friend. Killer beard.
My barber cut it down a little bit, man.
No, but it's looking good. Look, strong beard game.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it.
All right, y'all. Peace.
All right, man.